Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is presenting an argument that the international left needs to embrace dialectical materialism, that we cannot separate from this. This is a vital tool in our fight against capitalism and all systems that are evil. And I'm going to use the thought of Mao Zedong and the comic book, rather, a favorite of mine, which is Adam Warlock, in order to make my case. And so, let us begin. Mao's core claim. So, reality is contradiction in motion. So, at the heart of Mao Zedong's thought, especially in his essay on contradiction, is a simple but visceral idea. Everything that exists is defined by internal contradictions, like organs grinding against each other, and change comes from their struggle, like blood forced through narrowing veins, essentially. So, for Mao, capitalism isn't just bad policy or greedy people, it is a structured contradiction, a body at war with itself. And so, capital versus labor, so like teeth biting down on the tongue, production versus profit, the lungs, so they are like lungs gasping while the throat tightens, and so a human need versus accumulation. So, this is like a stomach that devours but never digests. So, if you don't understand these contradictions materially, that is, in the bone and tissue of economic life, you end up fighting ghosts like saliva instead of the jaw that produces it. So, Mao's argument for dialectical materialism is without it, the international left becomes moralistic, like a tongue complaining about pain without sensing the broken tooth. Have you noticed that? That leftists tend to be highly moralistic rather than materialistic, which is such a shame when you think about it. So, with it, the international left becomes strategic, like a surgeon tracing nerves and arteries to find the source of bleeding. Number two, why the international left needs dialectical materialism. So, Mao would argue the global left fails when it treats capitalism as a static body instead of one mutating, shedding skin, regrowing tissue. So, it imports ideas mechanically without feeling the local pulse or pressure points, and it focuses on identity or discourse like surface skin, ignoring the organs underneath. So, dialectical materialism forces three disciplines essentially. Number one, identify the principal contradiction. Not all wounds bleed equally, and so, an example, which artery is severed, capital versus labor globally, or imperial core versus periphery. Without this clarity, movements hemorrhage energy. And so that's A. And so B, understand uneven development. And so capitalism grows like a body with mismatched limbs. It sort of gets back to the Lacanian idea of we're always born too early as babies. When you think about it, we're sort of, we're unable to sort of think. And so capitalism grows like a body with mismatched limbs. And so tech capitalism in the US is a hypertrophied brain, essentially, when you think about it. Whereas extraction economies in the global south, like organs harvested for others, kind of macabre organ trafficking, when you think about it, and financialization everywhere, so that's blood circulating without nourishing tissue. A non-dialectical left prescribes one medicine for every organ, which is systemic collapse, essentially, of the international left. And so, C, embrace transformation, not purity. And so, contradictions don't resolve cleanly. They rupture, scar, metastasize. And so this means alliances are temporary ligaments. Strategies must adapt like immune responses. Correct lines calcify, if not rebroken and reset. So where does the wonderful comic book Adam Warlock come into this? So it's an allegory of contradiction when you think about it. So Adam Warlock is literally a dialectical body split open. So the central contradiction, Warlock versus the Magus. Warlock equals living tissue, nerve endings awake, the possibility of healing. The Magus is actually a cancerous future self, bone turned against marrow, domination calcified. So this is Mathwa Mal's principle in narrative flesh. The contradiction is internal, like a body attacking its own organs. Warlock cannot defeat evil as something out there. He must confront the fact that the rot grows from his own cells. So Adam Warlock, when you think about it, is a kind of dialectical materialist hero. So his journey mirrors Maoist method in three sort of deep, visceral ways. Number one, he rejects idealism. So Warlock initially seeks moral clarity, good versus evil, infected versus clean, and so on and so forth. But he learns the Magus is not an external infection. He is the natural mutation of Warlock's own biological trajectory. This is Mathwa Mal's critique of idealism. Evil is not a stain, it is a growth from the body's own contradictions. And so, number two, he analyzes the process, not just the enemy. So, Warlock doesn't just try to cut out the tumor, he studies how did this mutation form? What metabolic chain produced this malignant future? This is dialectical thinking. Focus on metabolism, circulation, transformation, not just the visible wound. Number three, he resolves contradiction through transformation. So, this is spoiler logic, okay, but it's essential to my point. So, spoilers, okay, Warlock ultimately resolves the contradiction not by smashing flesh, but by interrupting the process that feeds the tumor, collapsing the timeline like cutting off a blood supply to diseased tissue. This is profoundly Maoist. You don't heal a body by punching it. You change the conditions that make it sick. So, the synthesis, Mao and Warlock. So, this is the strategy for the international left, essentially. Here's the argument, now with pulse and pressure. Premise 1. Capitalism is a system of evolving material conditions, like a body whose organs grind and compete. Mathwa Mao. Premise 2. These contradictions reproduce domination, even inside resistance movements themselves, like cells turning cancerous. Warlock Magus. Premise 3. Without dialectical materialism, the international left misdiagnoses the illness, treats symptoms, while arteries rupture, reproduces the same pathological structures. And so the conclusion, therefore, the international left must embrace dialectical materialism to locate the real sites of pressure and fracture, track how contradictions circulate through the system, transform the conditions that keep the disease alive. The deeper insight, where this gets interesting when you think about it, Warlock shows something Mathwa Mao hints at, but doesn't fully embody in flesh. The enemy is not just capitalism, it is the body's tendency to reproduce domination within its own tissues. And so a non-dialectical international left risks becoming its own Magus, bureaucratic like calcified bone, dogmatic like a locked jaw, detached like a numbed limb. Dialectical materialism is not just a tool, It is a kind of collective anatomy, a way to keep the body from turning against itself. When you think about it, that is Matua Mao Zedong in a nutshell. Warlock Magus. He became Magus in his older years. So, the final thought, if Mao gives us the method, Warlock gives us the warning etched in bone. Matua Mao, understand contradictions of the body, will fail. Warlock, fail to understand them, and the body becomes its own disease. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.